Happy Friday, football fans. Welcome into Four Verts. My name is Harrison Graham. If you want daily and free NFL and college football content here on YouTube, we're the channel for you. Subscribe. We're like 100 subs away from 2,000 on the channel. Should Colts fans and just NFL fans as a whole be worried about Anthony Richardson, the second-year quarterback in Indianapolis? I did not think he had a very good preseason, and he played a few drives last night. And it started pretty well. Nice little touchdown to start the game, but then a really ugly interception. A pick six inside their own 20. Looked like it was kind of an option route where he thought the receiver was going to run a dig, and the receiver kind of went out into the flat. So could have been a miscommunication, but even if he digs right there, it's still a yard or two behind him, and it's a simple throw. It's not like he put it on him. So that was not great. And when you look at the preseason as a whole for him, for a guy who needs a lot of reps, one, he didn't play a lot, and two, 10 of 18, 86 yards. That touchdown and interception I mentioned, he was 2 for 6 overall in his first action earlier on. And obviously, look, this is a young player who hasn't played a ton and is coming off a collarbone injury, so I'm not expecting him to just light the world on fire right away. But Kirk Herbstreit kind of went down a tangent that got me thinking. And I'll kind of react to what he said here real quick. He said, and he was on the broadcast with Al Michaels. They were kind of doing their tune-up game on Prime Video. He said, what if he struggles? Talking about Richardson. How long do you go if Richardson is inconsistent? You know what you're going to get with Joe Flacco. The average NFL fan who's not a Colts fan may not even realize that the Colts signed Joe Flacco, who obviously did some magical things last year with the Cleveland Browns, but he is 38, 39 years old. Ideally, you don't want to do that. I do think this is an overreaction from Herbstreit to jump to this hypothetical already, but let's just be real. Anthony Richardson has not played a ton of football. He just hasn't. He has not played a ton of football. And the football he has played has been wildly inconsistent. Accuracy issues, questionable decision-making. Now, I like the fit with Shane Steichen. Can he build around his strengths? I think he can, but the player has to do his part as well, right? Like it can't, like Shane Steichen isn't just some magic genie that's going to turn any person into a star NFL player. Like Anthony Richardson is at least going to have to hold his own. And you look at his history at Florida, sub 55% guy, 54.7. Now, they had some issues there, coaching changes, not the best offense for him perhaps. Okay, sure, it's the college level. These things can happen sometimes. Well, in limited action as a rookie, it was better, but it's not like he was completing 65% of his throws. It's 59.5. Obviously, he was able to run around, and I thought flashed in the 4 games he played last year before having that season-ending injury. But at the same time, despite saying all of that, I think, and I did a YouTube short on this a few weeks back, he's, for the most part, a complete unknown. He just has not played a ton. Didn't play a ton in college, hasn't played much in the NFL. Training camp's been up and down. Preseason wasn't great. Here's one thing I do know. I trust Shane Steichen as a coach and an offensive mind. He's made it work with a lot of different type of quarterbacks. When he was the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia in 2022, Jalen Hurts was an MVP candidate, almost beat Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl and had like 400 total yards in that game. Hurts didn't play nearly as well the next year. Last year, Richardson gets hurt early. They go to Gardner Minshew, a completely different player that you have to call completely different plays for. They're a bad throw in the flat away from winning the AFC South. Like, he knows how to adapt to his player. I think that's pretty clear. But the player still has to be good enough in the things that he does well. So I think when you look at this and kind of take next steps, I think the reality is, especially in the short term, you're going to have to run Anthony Richardson. 6'5", 250. He's a dynamic runner, but he's got an injury history now. That's the concern. So you want to protect him, but you can't protect him so much that you take away the one thing he does really well, which is run the ball. So it's up to Shane Steichen to find that balance, but ultimately up to Anthony Richardson to progress as a passer. I mean, we got reports earlier this week in the joint practice against Cincinnati where Bengals defensive players are barking at him like, dude, throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball. I know it gets chippy in those practices, but they're kind of trolling him, making fun of him because he wouldn't pull the trigger. And then he throws an ugly pick in the game. So you just don't want this guy to be rattled early. He's already having to come back from a serious injury. He hasn't played a ton of football. He's still pretty raw as a prospect. That's why I kind of made the Josh Allen comp. Josh Allen was wild and all over the place in college at Wyoming and early on in his NFL career. But once he got to play enough and got to see reps and they got some pieces around him, which I think Richardson has a lot of talent on that offense. Michael Pittman, A.D. Mitchell, they can run the ball with Taylor. I think he's got a shot, but Josh obviously improved a ton. He became more accurate. He was able to become one of the more dynamic players in the NFL that's also consistent as a passer. Richardson has a lot to prove to be consistent as a passer. That's why I could see him becoming the next Josh Allen or flaming out within a couple of years. Neither scenario would surprise me whatsoever. And ultimately, this is why you signed Joe Flacco. Because Joe Flacco proved last year that even if he's not at his peak, even though he can't move that well anymore, he can run an offense. He can make a lot of the throws still. And Shane Steichen is a smart guy that he got the most out of Gardner Minshew last year. I think if Flacco had to play, that Colts team could still be pretty competitive because I think it's a good roster in the AFC South. Now, I'm not making this move early if Richardson struggles. I think unless it's just a complete disaster, you give Richardson this year. But Flacco's there for a reason. And I'll say this, if they go to Flacco, that's a pretty strong indictment on Richardson. That must mean he's really struggling and not progressing as a player, and that Steichen says, I don't want to mess around. I don't want to waste this year. I want to try and compete. So Flacco's there to help mentor him, but he's also there if things are ugly, he can still play a little bit as well, as we saw in 2023. All right, quick thoughts on a trade that just went down about an hour and a half ago, Bears-Seahawks trade. Chicago's clearly been in the market for a pass rusher. That was well documented when they tried to trade for Matt Judon. We saw that on Hard Knocks for anyone who watched. It was well reported as well. Well, they pivot to Darrell Taylor, who spent the last few years with the Seattle Seahawks. He has 21.5 sacks in 3 seasons, including 9.5 a couple years ago. Only had to give up a 6th-round pick to get him, which I thought was pretty interesting. Now, he's only on like a 1-year, $3.2 million deal, so I don't think Seattle was expecting a huge haul for him, but Chicago needed a guy who can get after the quarterback opposite of Montez Sweat. You plug this guy in here, makes that defense that much more formidable, a group that looked pretty good the second half of last year. There were reports out of Seattle that Taylor is just not a schematic fit with what Mike McDonald, their new head coach, who comes over from the Ravens as their defensive coordinator, taken over. So I guess that fit didn't work, but maybe it's a win-win. But if I'm the Bears, 6th-round pick for, at minimum, a guy who can rush the passer, I feel pretty good about that. And I think also what stands out to me is Ryan Poles, the Bears GM, he's not being reckless, but he's trying to make moves right now. He's trying to win right now. Maybe not the Super Bowl, but he expects this team to compete and be a playoff team, I think. I think that's something that's become pretty clear, and I'll be curious to see how things shake out for Seattle this year with their first-year head coach and Mike McDonald and John Schneider having full control of player personnel with Pete Carroll gone. But, yeah, I thought this was an interesting trade. You figured Chicago was going to try to make some kind of move after not getting Judon, and now they get it in Darrell Taylor. So that trade went down a little bit ago. Thought I'd give some thoughts on that. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. By the way, college football back tomorrow. Week 0 is here. We got Georgia Tech, Florida State in Ireland is kind of the Week 0 headline game. I'll be tuning in for that. Hopefully you guys will as well. Probably going to be dropping my 12-team college football playoff projection either tomorrow or very soon with the season back. So be sure to check that out. Of course, a lot of NFL news to react to over the next several days with roster cutdown day, potential trades coming up. We'll see what happens with Brandon Ayuk. Keep us locked in. Hit that subscribe button. Let's hit 2,000 subs, and we'll see you guys next time here on 4 Verts.